I'll never forget the moment my 12-year-old son stood up in that courtroom and said the words that silenced everyone, including the judge who was about to give his father everything he wanted. My name is Sarah Martinez, and 6 months ago, I was just another exhausted single mom trying to survive a messy divorce. I'm 34. I teach third grade at Jefferson Elementary, and I thought I understood how the world worked. Good people get rewarded, bad behavior has consequences, and the truth always comes out in the end. Boy, was I wrong. See, my ex-husband Derek had spent our entire 8-year marriage perfecting the art of looking perfect on the outside. He's 36, sells million-dollar homes downtown, drives a BMW that's always spotless, and has this smile that makes everyone think he's the nicest guy they've ever met. To our neighbors, to Tyler's teachers, to anyone who mattered, Derek Martinez was the ideal dad and husband. What they didn't see was how he controlled every aspect of my life, checking my phone, questioning every friendship, making me feel like I was losing my mind whenever I tried to stand up for myself. But this story isn't really about Derek. It's about my son Tyler, who was sitting in that courtroom watching his father try to destroy his mother, and who decided he'd heard enough lies for one lifetime. Tyler's always been different from other kids his age. While his classmates are obsessed with video games and sports, Tyler sits in corners drawing these incredibly detailed pictures of people's faces. He notices things: the way someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes, how voices change when adults think kids aren't listening. At 12 years old, Tyler had already figured out things about people that took me decades to learn. When Derek first filed for full custody, claiming I was an unfit mother, I thought it was just another one of his power plays. He'd done it before, threatened to take Tyler away whenever I did something he didn't like. But this time was different. This time, he had a lawyer. Mr. Richardson wasn't just any family attorney. He was the guy other lawyers warned you about, the one who specialized in destroying opposing parties so completely that they'd give up just to make the pain stop. Richardson was in his 50s, wore expensive suits, and had this way of smirking that made you feel like he knew something you didn't. Derek had hired him specifically because Richardson promised he could handle me and make sure Derek got everything he wanted. On the other side of that courtroom sat my lawyer, Ms. Chen, fresh out of law school and working for the public defender's office because I couldn't afford anyone else. She was smart and determined, but she was also 28 years old going up against a man who'd been destroying families for longer than she'd been practicing law. The odds were stacked against us from day one. Derek made twice my salary, lived in a luxury condo while I rented a 2-bedroom apartment, and had convinced half the town that I was having some kind of breakdown. Meanwhile, I was working double shifts just to pay my legal bills, coming home exhausted to help Tyler with homework, and trying to pretend like my world wasn't falling apart. But here's what Derek didn't count on. Here's what his expensive lawyer, with his intimidation tactics and his smug confidence, completely missed. Tyler had been watching. Tyler had been listening, and Tyler had been forming his own opinions about what was happening to his family. That day in court, when Richardson made the mistake of referring to my son as a ticking time bomb, while Derek sat there nodding in agreement, something shifted. In that moment, Tyler stopped being the quiet kid who tried to keep everyone happy and became someone I'd never seen before, someone who was done watching adults play games with his life. What happened next changed everything. Not just the custody ruling, not just our family dynamic, but my entire understanding of who my son really was. Because sometimes the person you think you need to protect is actually the strongest person in the room. And sometimes all they need is the chance to show you exactly how strong they've always been. This is the story of how my 12-year-old son saved us both with nothing but the truth. Let me take you back to where this all started, 6 months before that courthouse moment that changed everything. Picture this. It's 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in March, and I'm standing in my cramped apartment kitchen, making Tyler's lunch while simultaneously grading spelling tests and trying to figure out how I'm going to pay the electric bill that's sitting on my counter, stamped with a bright red, final notice. This wasn't the life I'd planned. Just 8 months earlier, I was living in a beautiful 4-bedroom house in Maple Heights, married to a man I thought loved me, believing we were building something together. Derek and I had met at a charity fundraiser 9 years ago. I was there representing my school, and he was the successful real estate agent who donated the venue. He swept me off my feet with grand gestures and expensive dinners, always insisting on paying for everything, always knowing exactly what I needed before I even asked. Back then, I thought his attention to detail was romantic. When he surprised me with a new phone, because mine was getting old, I was touched. When he suggested I didn't need to go out with my girlfriends so often because we should be spending time together, it felt like devotion. When he started picking out my clothes for work events because he wanted me to look perfect, I convinced myself it was sweet. But Derek's charm had an expiration date, and mine apparently ran out somewhere around year 3 of our marriage. The man who used to bring me flowers every Friday started criticizing the way I arranged them. The husband who once praised my cooking began pointing out everything I did wrong in the kitchen. Slowly, methodically, Derek began rebuilding me into someone smaller, someone who second-guessed every decision and apologized for existing. Tyler was born into this tension when I was 27. For a while, Derek seemed to soften. He was genuinely good with baby Tyler, patient during those sleepless nights, proud to show off his son. I thought having a child might save our marriage. I was wrong. If anything, Tyler became another tool Derek used to control me. You can't take Tyler to your mother's house. She's a bad influence. Tyler doesn't need you hovering over him all the time. You're making him weak with all that coddling. By the time Tyler turned 10, our house felt like a minefield. Derek would come home from work in unpredictable moods, and Tyler and I learned to read the signs. Car door slammed a little too hard? Stay quiet during dinner. Phone conversation that ended abruptly. Don't ask for help with homework tonight. Tyler became hyper-aware of adult emotions, always watching faces, always trying to smooth over conflicts before they started. The divorce should have been my escape, but Derek turned it into another form of torture. Initially, he agreed to joint custody, 50-50 time, shared decisions, civilized co-parenting. I actually believed we could make it work for Tyler's sake. Then I made the mistake of going on a coffee date with another teacher from my school. Just coffee. Nothing serious. But Derek found out. That's when everything changed. Suddenly, Derek decided Tyler needed stability and that I was too emotional to be a primary parent. He moved into a luxury condo downtown, complete with a gaming room for Tyler and a pool on the roof. Meanwhile, I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment above Mrs. Patterson's garage, working extra tutoring sessions just to make rent. Derek started what I now recognize as a campaign to discredit me. He'd show up at Tyler's school events with his new girlfriend, Madison, a 28-year-old marketing executive who looked like she stepped out of a magazine playing the perfect family unit. He'd volunteer for field trips I couldn't afford to take time off work for, host elaborate birthday parties for Tyler's classmates while I was grading papers at my kitchen table. But the worst part wasn't Derek's games. It was watching Tyler get caught in the middle. My sweet, sensitive boy who used to tell me everything started keeping secrets. He'd come home from weekends at Derek's house with expensive new clothes and stories about fancy restaurants. But he'd also come home quiet, withdrawn, like he was carrying weight that was too heavy for his shoulders. Tyler's artwork changed during this time. His drawings, which used to be bright and imaginative, became darker, more serious. He started drawing portraits of people with sad eyes, people who looked like they were carrying invisible burdens. When I asked him about it, he'd just shrug and say, "That's how people really look when they think nobody's watching." I should have realized then that Tyler was seeing more than I thought. I should have understood that my 12-year-old son was already figuring out truths that adults spend lifetimes learning. But I was so busy trying to keep us afloat, so focused on surviving Derek's attacks, that I missed the most important thing happening right in front of me. Tyler was growing up, and he was getting tired of watching his father try to destroy his mother. The real war began on a Monday morning in April when I opened my mailbox to find a thick envelope from Richardson and Associates. My hands were shaking as I read the petition for full custody, but it was the attached character assassination that made my knees buckle. Derek wasn't just asking for Tyler, he was systematically destroying my reputation as a mother. The document painted me as an unstable woman who couldn't provide for her child. It claimed I was frequently absent from home due to work obligations that Tyler had, expressed concerns about his living situation, and that I had demonstrated erratic behavior following the divorce. Every late night I'd spent grading papers to earn extra money. Every tutoring session I'd taken to pay our bills. Every moment of exhaustion from working 2 jobs. Derek had twisted it all into evidence that I was neglecting Tyler. But the real gut punch came when I read Tyler's supposed statements. According to the filing, my son had told his father that he felt sad at Mom's house and wished he could live somewhere more fun. Reading those words felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it stopped beating. These weren't Tyler's words. I knew my son. But seeing them in black and white legal documents made me question everything I thought I knew about our relationship. That evening, when Tyler came home from school, I watched him differently. Was he really unhappy? Had I been so focused on surviving that I'd missed signs he was struggling? When he quietly did his homework at our small kitchen table instead of sprawling on a king-size bed like he did at Derek's place, was he thinking about how much better his life could be elsewhere? The doubt Derek planted in that courtroom filing started growing like poison in my mind. But then something happened that made me realize just how calculated Derek's strategy really was. I was at the grocery store on a Saturday when I ran into Derek's neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who'd always been kind to me. She pulled me aside and whispered, "Sarah, honey, I think you should know what I overheard." My stomach dropped as she continued. "Derek was on his balcony last week talking to that lawyer of his, and I heard him say something that just didn't sit right with me." Mrs. Thompson looked around nervously before continuing. "He said, she can have custody. He'll grow to hate her anyway. Kids always blame the parent they live with when life gets hard. Give it 2 years and Tyler will be begging to live with me." She paused, studying my face. That man was laughing, Sarah, laughing about his own son's potential misery. Hearing those words was like having a spotlight suddenly illuminate a dark room. Derek wasn't fighting for Tyler because he wanted to be a better father. He was playing a long game designed to turn my son against me. The expensive gifts, the fun activities, the luxury apartment. It was all calculated to make Tyler's life with me seem shabby by comparison. While Derek positioned himself as the rescuer Tyler would eventually run to. But Derek's strategy was more sophisticated than I'd imagined. Richardson wasn't just filing motions. He was bleeding me dry financially. Every document they submitted required a response from Ms. Chen, and every response cost money I didn't have. They were banking on me running out of resources before the case even went to trial. The psychological warfare escalated when Derek started showing up everywhere Tyler and I went. Soccer practice, parent-teacher conferences, even the grocery store. Suddenly, Derek was there with Madison, playing the devoted father role while I looked like the stressed-out single mom barely keeping it together. He'd make a show of buying Tyler expensive cleats or volunteering to drive the team to away games while I was working. Tyler began coming home from these encounters confused and withdrawn. One night, I found him crying in his room. When I asked what was wrong, he said, "Dad told me that if you really loved me, you wouldn't make this so hard for everyone. He said the fighting could stop if you just let me live with him." That's when I realized Derek wasn't just manipulating the legal system. He was manipulating Tyler. My 12-year-old son was being told that his mother's fight for him was actually selfishness, that my love for him was causing his parents' conflict. Derek was making Tyler feel guilty for being loved by his mother. The breaking point came when Tyler's grades started dropping, and his teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, called me in for a conference. "Tyler seems distracted lately," she said gently. "He's having trouble concentrating, and yesterday I found him crying during recess. When I asked what was wrong, he said he felt like everything was his fault." Sitting in that classroom, looking at Tyler's declining test scores and listening to his teacher describe my happy, creative child as withdrawn and anxious, I realized Derek's plan was working. He was turning our custody battle into Tyler's emotional battleground, and my son was losing the war. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done protecting Tyler from the truth, and I was done letting Derek's lies go unchallenged. It was time for my son to understand what was really happening to our family. The conversation that changed everything happened on a Thursday evening in late May. Tyler was sitting at our kitchen table, mechanically eating the spaghetti I'd made, while staring at his math homework like it was written in a foreign language. I'd been watching him struggle for weeks. This brilliant, perceptive kid who used to light up when he talked about his day was now just going through the motions of being a child. I sat down across from him and took a deep breath. "Tyler, we need to talk about what's been happening with Dad and me." He looked up, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before: fear. Not the fear of getting in trouble, but the fear of an adult conversation he wasn't sure he wanted to have. "Am I in trouble?" he asked quietly. "No, sweetheart, but I think you're carrying around some heavy feelings that aren't yours to carry." I reached across the table and touched his hand. "You know how Dad and I are going to court next week?" Tyler nodded, his grip tightening on his pencil. "Dad said if I tell the judge I want to live with him, everything will be easier for everyone." My heart clenched, but I kept my voice steady. "What do you think about that?" For a long moment, Tyler just stared at his homework. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost missed it, he said, "I think Dad's lawyer talks about me like I'm not a real person." That's when I knew Tyler had been listening to more than anyone realized. "What do you mean?" Tyler set down his pencil and looked directly at me. "When I was at Dad's last weekend, his lawyer came over. They were in the kitchen, and I was supposed to be watching TV, but I heard them talking about me. The lawyer said I was like a asset to be acquired, and that kids my age are easily influenced by the parent who spoils them more." Tyler's voice cracked slightly. "Mom, what does that mean?" I felt a surge of anger so powerful it took my breath away, but I forced myself to stay calm. "It means they're thinking about you like you're a thing instead of a person with your own thoughts and feelings." "That's what I thought." Tyler picked up his pencil again, then put it down. "Mom, can I ask you something? And will you tell me the truth?" "Always." "Are you and Dad fighting because of me?" This was the moment I'd been dreading and preparing for. I could see the guilt eating away at my son, the 12-year-old logic that made him think he was responsible for adult problems. "Tyler, your dad and I are having disagreements about what's best for you, but the fighting isn't your fault. Adults are responsible for their own choices and their own behavior." Tyler nodded slowly. "Dad said you're being difficult because you don't want him to be happy with Madison." I took another deep breath. "Tyler, I want your dad to be happy, but I also want you to be happy, and I want to be your mom. Sometimes adults disagree about important things, and that's why we have judges, to help families make decisions when parents can't agree." "Will I have to talk to the judge?" "Maybe. And if you do, the most important thing is to tell the truth about how you feel and what you want. Not what Dad wants you to say, not what I want you to say, but what Tyler Martinez really thinks and feels." That night, Tyler couldn't sleep. I found him in his room at midnight, sitting by his window with his sketch pad. He was drawing a picture of a courtroom, complete with a judge's bench and 2 tables facing each other. But what struck me was the figure he'd drawn in the center, a small person standing up, surrounded by adults who were all looking at him. "That's me," Tyler said when he noticed me watching. "In my dream, I'm standing up and everyone's listening to me." "What are you saying in the dream?" Tyler was quiet for a moment. "The truth." The next morning, Miss Chen called to warn me about what to expect in court. "Richardson's going to try to intimidate Tyler if the judge allows him to speak," she said. "He's known for making children feel small and confused. Are you sure Tyler can handle that kind of pressure?" I thought about Tyler's drawing, about his quiet observation that Derek's lawyer talked about him like he wasn't a real person. "Miss Chen, I think Tyler's stronger than any of us realize." But even as I said those words, doubt crept in. Tyler was still just a 12-year-old boy who wanted his parents to stop fighting. Could I really ask him to stand up to experienced lawyers and a system designed to intimidate? That weekend, Tyler spent Saturday with Derek as usual. When he came home Sunday evening, he was different, quieter, but not in the withdrawn way I'd grown used to. This was a focused quiet, like he was thinking hard about something important. "Mom," he said as I was tucking him into bed, "what happens if I tell the judge something Dad doesn't want me to say?" "What do you mean?" Tyler was quiet for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. Then he said, "What if I tell the judge that I don't like how Dad talks about you?" My breath caught. "Tyler, you should never feel like you have to protect me." "But what if I want to? What if I'm tired of people saying things that aren't true?" The night before the hearing, I found a letter Tyler had written and left on my pillow. It said, "Mom, tomorrow I'm going to tell everyone the truth about our family. I'm not scared anymore. Love, Tyler." Reading those words, I realized my son had already made his choice. All I could do was trust him to use his voice when it mattered most. The morning of June 15th arrived gray and drizzling, which felt appropriate for what I expected to be the worst day of my life. Tyler and I sat in the courthouse hallway at 8:30 a.m., both of us wearing our best clothes, his button-down shirt that was slightly too big and my navy blazer from Target that I'd owned for 6 years. Across the hall, Derek sat with Richardson, both in expensive suits looking like they owned the building. Judge Williams called our case at 9:15 a.m. sharp. The Honorable Patricia Williams was a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and reading glasses that she peered over when she wanted to study someone closely. She'd been handling family court cases for over 20 years, and her reputation was for being fair but no nonsense. "This is a petition for modification of custody," Judge Williams began, scanning the documents in front of her. "Mr. Richardson, you may present your client's case." What happened next was like watching a master manipulator at work. Richardson stood up, adjusted his tie, and launched into a performance that painted Derek as the ideal father and me as a woman barely holding her life together. "Your Honor, Mr. Martinez has serious concerns about his son's well-being in the current custody arrangement. Tyler is frequently left alone while Ms. Martinez works multiple jobs. The child has expressed to his father that he feels neglected and would prefer the stability that Mr. Martinez can provide." Richardson pulled out photographs, Derek's luxury condo, Tyler's bedroom there with its own gaming setup, the building's pool and gym facilities. Then he presented my apartment, somehow making our cozy home look cramped and depressing in the harsh courtroom lighting. "Furthermore, Your Honor, Ms. Martinez has demonstrated concerning behavior since the divorce. She's been erratic, financially unstable, and has shown poor judgment in involving Tyler in adult conflicts." I watched Derek nodding along, playing the concerned father role perfectly. Madison sat behind him in the gallery, looking like a picture-perfect stepmother in waiting. Everything was going exactly as they'd planned. Ms. Chen did her best when our turn came, presenting evidence of my involvement in Tyler's school activities, testimony from his teachers about his academic performance, and documentation of Derek's controlling behavior during our marriage. But I could see in Judge Williams' expression that the financial disparity between Derek and me was hard to ignore. Then Richardson stood up for his closing argument, and that's when everything changed. "Your Honor, I understand that custody modifications can be emotional for everyone involved," Richardson began, that familiar smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "But we must consider what's truly best for the child, not what makes the adults feel better." He gestured toward Tyler, who had been sitting quietly in the first row behind me. "Children are remarkably resilient, even if there's initial resistance to a change in custody. We're essentially dealing with a ticking time bomb of resentment that will eventually explode on whichever parent the child is forced to live with. It's better to place Tyler in the more stable environment now, regardless of any temporary emotional adjustment period." That's when it happened. Tyler, who had been sitting perfectly still throughout the entire hearing, suddenly stood up. Not slowly, not hesitantly. He stood up like someone who had heard enough. The court clerk, Mrs. Davidson, who had been typing steadily for over an hour, stopped mid-sentence. Her hands froze over the keyboard. Judge Williams looked up from her notes, her reading glasses sliding down her nose as she focused directly on Tyler. The courtroom went completely silent. Derek's confident expression faltered. Richardson turned around, clearly annoyed that his closing argument had been interrupted by a child. "The only thing I hate," Tyler said, his voice clear and steady, "is how he treats her." Judge Williams leaned forward in her chair. "Tyler, you don't need to—" But Tyler wasn't finished. 12 years of watching, listening, and processing adult behavior came pouring out in words that no lawyer could have coached, no adult could have scripted. "My dad told me to say that Mom makes me sad, but she doesn't. She works hard so we can have a nice home, and she helps me with my homework every night even when she's tired." Tyler's voice grew stronger with each word. "He makes me sad when he calls her names, and when his lawyer talks about me like I'm not here, like I don't have feelings." Richardson tried to interrupt. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." Judge Williams held up her hand for silence, her full attention on Tyler. "Continue, son." "I heard them talking about me like I was something to win instead of a person. His lawyer said I was a ticking time bomb. But I'm not a bomb. I'm just a kid who wants his parents to stop being mean to each other." Tyler looked directly at Derek, then back at the judge. "I don't want to live somewhere where people are mean to my mom. She's not perfect, but she loves me, and she doesn't try to make me hate my dad." Derek's face had gone pale. Madison was staring at her hands. Richardson was frantically shuffling papers, clearly trying to figure out how to salvage his case. Tyler sat back down, and the silence in that courtroom was deafening. Judge Williams removed her glasses completely, studying the faces of everyone in the room. "Well," she said finally, "I think we've heard all we need to hear." Judge Williams took exactly 14 minutes to reach her decision. I know because I watched every second tick by on the courtroom clock while she reviewed the case files one final time. When she looked up, her expression was resolute. After careful consideration of all testimony presented today, particularly the spontaneous and candid statement from Tyler Martinez himself, this court awards primary physical custody to Ms. Sarah Martinez. Her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Tyler's unprompted testimony demonstrates remarkable maturity and clarity regarding his own emotional needs and family dynamics. This court believes that a child's voice, when expressed without coercion, carries significant weight in custody determinations. Derek's face crumpled like someone had physically struck him. Richardson gathered his papers with sharp, angry movements, clearly furious that a 12-year-old had just dismantled his carefully constructed case. But Tyler, my brave, brilliant son, just reached over and squeezed my hand. Judge Williams wasn't finished. "Mr. Martinez will retain visitation rights every other weekend and alternating holidays. However, this court strongly encourages both parents to consider family counseling to improve communication for Tyler's benefit." She looked directly at Derek. "Children should never be positioned as weapons in adult conflicts." That was 6 months ago. Today, as I'm telling you this story, Tyler is thriving in ways I never expected. His grades shot back up to A's and B's within a month of the custody ruling. The nightmares stopped completely. Most importantly, that spark in his eyes, the curiosity and joy that Derek's manipulation had nearly extinguished, came flooding back. Tyler's art evolved too. Instead of those dark, worried faces he'd been drawing during the custody battle, he started creating these incredible detailed drawings of people laughing, families playing together, kids being kids. His art teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, pulled me aside last month to say she'd never seen such a dramatic, positive change in a student's creative expression. But here's what I didn't expect. Derek changed too. The first visitation weekend after the court ruling was awkward and tense. Derek picked up Tyler with this defeated, almost embarrassed expression, like he wasn't sure how to interact with his son now that the performance was over. But something shifted during that weekend. When Derek brought Tyler home, he asked if we could talk privately. "Sarah," he said, standing on my doorstep looking more vulnerable than I'd seen him in years, "I owe you an apology. Richardson convinced me that destroying you was the only way to win Tyler back, but Tyler was right. I wasn't trying to win my son, I was trying to win a game." Derek's voice cracked slightly. I almost lost him completely by trying to turn him against the person he loves most. Over the following months, Derek's entire approach to fatherhood transformed. He stopped trying to compete with me and started actually connecting with Tyler. Their weekends together became less about expensive activities and more about genuine bonding. Cooking together, working on Tyler's art projects, having real conversations about Tyler's interests instead of drilling him about life at my house. The most surprising change came when Derek ended his relationship with Madison just 3 weeks after the court ruling. Tyler told me later that Derek had explained to him that Madison had encouraged the custody battle strategy, believing it would clear the path for their relationship. Derek chose his son over his girlfriend, and honestly, that decision meant more to me than any apology could have. Derek even started paying more child support than the court required, and when my car broke down last month, he offered to help with repairs without any strings attached. It was like watching someone remember who they used to be before pride and control took over their life. But the most profound change has been in my relationship with Tyler. That conversation we had in our kitchen, the decision to trust him with age-appropriate truth, opened a door between us that I never realized had been closed. We started having what we call honesty hours every Sunday evening, where Tyler can ask me anything about our family, the divorce, or life in general, and I promise to give him real answers. Last Sunday, Tyler asked me, "Mom, do you think Dad learned something from what happened in court?" I thought about Derek's transformation, about the man who now calls before visitation to ask what Tyler needs instead of what he wants to do. "I think your dad learned that being a parent isn't about winning or losing, it's about listening." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "I'm glad I told the truth that day." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." If you're watching this and you're going through your own custody battle, remember what Tyler taught that courtroom. Children aren't prizes to be won or weapons to be used. They're human beings with their own voices, their own feelings, and their own sense of justice. Sometimes the person you think needs protecting is actually the strongest one in the room, and sometimes all they need is the chance to show you exactly how strong they've always been. Tyler's courage didn't just save our family, it reminded all of us that truth, spoken with love, has the power to change everything. You know, when I started telling this story, I thought it was about a custody battle. But looking back now, I realize it was really about something much bigger. It was about learning to trust the people we love, even when they're younger than us, even when we think we need to protect them from the world. Tyler didn't just save our family that day in court. He taught me that children see more than we give them credit for, understand more than we assume, and sometimes have more courage than the adults around them. He showed me that honesty isn't something you protect kids from. It's something you share with them, because they're already living it whether we acknowledge it or not. I used to think that being a good mother meant shielding Tyler from every harsh reality. Now I know that being a good mother means trusting him to handle the truth and supporting him while he processes it. Those Sunday evening honesty hours we have, they've become the highlight of my week. Tyler asks questions that challenge me, observations that amaze me, and shares thoughts that remind me daily how lucky I am to be his mom. Derek and I still aren't friends, but we've become something better. We've become effective co-parents who put Tyler's happiness above our own egos. Tyler spends his weekends with his dad building model airplanes and talking about books, and he comes home to me excited to share what he's learned. That's what healing looks like in real life. Not perfect, but real and honest and full of love. If your family is going through something difficult right now, if you're fighting legal battles or emotional wars that feel impossible to win, remember Tyler's story. Remember that the people you're fighting for, whether they're your children, your siblings, your parents, they have voices too. They have wisdom you might not expect and strength you might not see. Listen to them, trust them, and sometimes let them save you right back. Your call to action. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own family's journey, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Your stories matter, and sharing them helps other people feel less alone in their struggles. And if Tyler's courage inspired you as much as it inspired me, please hit that like button to let me know this story resonated with you. Sharing these real-life stories helps them reach families who might need to hear them most. So if you know someone going through a custody battle or family conflict, please share this video with them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell, because I share new stories like this every week, real stories about real families finding their way through difficult times and coming out stronger on the other side. Thank you for listening to our story. Thank you for caring about families like mine and Tyler's courage. And remember, sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. I'll see you in the next video.